what's the use of two strong legs if you only run away? And what use is the finest voice when you have nothing good to say? What good is strength and muscle if you only push and shove? And what's the use of two good ears when you can't hear those you love? It's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got. Yeah, it's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Seeds of Revolution. Today we have two fantastic guests. Our first guest is Dr. Audrey Yap. Dr. Yap is a professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Victoria. Her research is in feminist philosophy with a particular focus on prison justice. Our other guest and Audrey's friend is Jose Toruno-Luquez. Jose is a community researcher who is on parole and has lived experience with incarceration. So welcome to Seeds of Revolution, Audrey and Jose. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Joel. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe Jose, Audrey, start with both of you, whoever wants to go first. If you could just share with our listeners how you first got involved with the movement for abolition, anti-carceral activism, prison justice issues in general.
Yeah, we probably each have a different story. And we met both kind of somewhere along the way of that. So for me, I got to thinking about incarceration and issues of prisons because I was writing a lot about gendered violence. And I started to think about whoever might be committing those kinds of acts and whoever might be committing acts of violence generally. And essentially, this leads to thinking about the entire system that we as a society have for dealing with harm that people do to one another. And it's probably an easy sell with this crowd, but that as soon as you start to look at that system kind of closely, a lot of the things fall apart. And I ended up being able to teach inside carceral facilities. And that just really cements the fact that whatever we're doing as a society with this carceral system is not working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the short version of my way in. And along the way, I got to meet Jose, who is, one of the coolest people I know.
Jose, how did you get interested in these issues?
Well, first, I met Audrey when I was incarcerated. She came in as a volunteer, as a book club volunteer. I was new to her work or learning about her work of like abolition and how she approaches it from a feminine standpoint or philosophy. And eventually we came across reading the book by Bell Hooks, The Will to Change, and it convicted me. The first time I read it, I was able to relate with her and her upbringing. The second time around, I came to realize that patriarchy's fucked up. Sorry for the language. But
That's okay. No need to apologize on this podcast.
and then, thank you. So, and then I started asking her and one of her colleagues who also came with her to the book club about their work and what reasons, what brought them to come to see us inside prison. Eventually, I got to read her work on not giving up on people with hers and Emmerich's work. I wanted to understand what she meant by abolition. I'm still trying to understand what abolition means when in terms of prison. Yeah, so that's where I'm at with this.
And you wrote a really nice commentary on the book that I have with Barrett Emmerich as my co-author for not giving up on people. Because I remember that while you were still in, Tamara, who's our friend and colleague who teaches in sociology, she was invited to give comments on my book, and we had a chance to to have her read out some of your comments on it, which I thought were fantastic. Just like your response as somebody who had kind of lived with that system for a lot longer.
Yeah, I mean, once I read the book over again, I wanted to study it, and then I started realizing how the way bell hooks articulated patriarchy, I was living under that umbrella within CSC, federal prison.
Yeah. Like, because I actually think that's really interesting. Like, we had such interesting conversations about, like, masculinity and patriarchy, in that particular book club, and I feel like abolitionists, so people who write books kind of like me, will say things like, "Oh, yeah, prison's a really misogynist environment," like, "You don't get people to become less misogynist by sending them to prison," like, nobody who knows anything about prisons would think that would work. But I feel like some of the stuff that I don't know, I'm just trying to make you share some more things about it because I feel like the insights that you had about
Yes.
misogyny in CSC,
Yes.
were super
So
valuable. Oh, no, I'm stealing Joel's job. I'm not supposed to do that.
You're already doing it better than I'm doing it, Audrey. Don't even worry about it.
Sorry, I get
yes.
excited.
So after I finished reading it the second time, I felt like, you know what, I had to say something. So I tried to express them in words, and then eventually Audrey and Tamara, they wanted to help me edit the work, and that's where we left off from there.
Jose, I read your article, The Boys Club Correctional Service of Canada, which I thought was fantastic. And I wanted to ask you about one quote which sort of touches on what you and Audrey were talking about. You write in that article that bell hooks gave me language for what I had long felt but could not articulate, that patriarchy harms everyone, not just women, but men who are taught to suppress their humanity in the name of dominance. And I'd love for you to expound upon that, particularly as somebody who has lived experience in the carceral system, your experience with patriarchy in that system and how that was a system that ended up harming you and other men in that system.
Yes. So I came to like she gave me this epiphany of myself where I seen these traits, these patriarchal behaviors and practices in myself. So once I knew or saw that in myself, I was able to see that around me. And so I hadn't realized that even when men are violent or aggressive towards each other, it also contributes to violence and aggression towards women. It just doesn't end between men. And there's always this like where men try to say, how they try to dominate over weak men as well. People who they consider weak could be someone who is able to express themselves, who is not insecure. And so I seen myself as such. I see myself away from patriarchy, slowly just getting away from it and then being isolated and excluded from groups and being called out on CFC.
So, question for both of you along the same vein. When it comes to prisons, is there a world in which a prison, well, let's not, a world is too big. Is there a Canada in which a prison could not be inherently patriarchal? Or as abolitionists, or as people who spend a lot of time at least thinking about abolition, do we come to the conclusion that we cannot really have one without the other?
That's such a good question. I feel like I think about this a lot, but I also might wanna push back against, like, thinking in those terms as well, because I feel like the thing that I really like about being an abolitionist is that it's constructive. I mean, it doesn't always like, the word doesn't sound like it's constructive, but I feel like anyone who works in the practice of abolition is always trying to do stuff, like trying to build connections, trying to find new ways to support people. Like, it's always trying to build something that's gonna replace the stuff that's not gonna work. And I feel like that focus is what actually helps draw people into abolition. So I feel like the answer to the question is maybe. And I think about those things sometimes, but I actually kind of hate speculating and like actively talking about it because ultimately I don't want to push for kinder, gentler prisons. I want to push for no prisons. So yeah, but I get a lot of those questions, right? Like, what about Norway? What about like what are there ways to improve the system? There's ways to improve the system, but ultimately I want to find replacements for it.
Jose, how about you? How do you see the nature of prisons and its relationship to patriarchy? Is that something that you think is inherent to the very concept of a carceral system?
Yes, of course. For one, you have no privacy, and they reward people who give to the status quo where men are dominant over weak men and women. I've seen it in women staff who want to help inmates progress, who want to help them rehabilitate. And yet when that happens, the men interfere, or they intervene and then try to shame their colleague or isolate her in the same way that patriarchy uses that in all areas, in all aspects.
Jose, where has your path taken you when it comes to prison abolition? Is that and I know that term is very, very loaded, as Audrey already talked about, but is that a term you self-identify with? Is that a term whose label you also might experience some discomfort with?
With the term abolition?
With the term and also the project. I'm curious about your belief, your feelings about the term and your feelings
Yes.
about the project of abolition as well.
Okay, so when I initially heard the word abolition, I was thinking, okay, you know what? Are we saying that we just need to let everybody out and that's it? No structure? Of course, I was just assuming I realized that I was conditioned to think that way. So I had to uncondition that thinking in order to understand what prison abolition meant. Do I want prisons to be gone with? Yes, I do. I don't think they should exist. I think there should be other ways of helping so-called offenders.
Can I put you on the spot for a second? Because I
Yep.
feel like I feel like this is something we've talked about. I feel like we've talked about how it's actually pretty unusual for incarcerated people to be to be prison abolitionists. Like it's not, I mean, it's obviously there's plenty, but most of the time when I spend time with incarcerated people, like doing book clubs and stuff, I don't often bring up abolition, and I also don't really find like a general kind of support for like for the idea. Which is yeah, fine. I mean, I don't find that in the general public too. But I think that's often surprising, I think, for people who've never been in carceral settings. Because sometimes I'm like, yeah, well, I talk about it with incarcerated people, and they're like, well, obviously they would believe in it. And I was like, I don't like that's actually not obvious, right? Like a lot of people, incarcerated people aren't abolitionists.
No, they're
Um,
not. I mean, there were times where I wanted to challenge, become a devil's advocate, and then ask others who were incarcerated and about their take on prison abolitionists. And again, they would say the same thing I would say, where we don't believe that we should let these monsters or these guys who are a lot worse than others out. So I think people think when they hear abolition, and I'm talking about incarcerated people, they think to the extreme. So I think that's the problem when they hear the word abolition.
yeah, which is funny, right? Because it's like I think that's also the case with non-incarcerated people. Like, folks who automatically resist the idea of abolition, I think are often thinking, "Hey, there's just 2 kinds of people in the world. There's the ones who belong in prison and there's the ones who don't." And I think that kind of thinking isn't just people who've never been in prison. Plenty of people who are in prison think that there's some people, not maybe not them, probably depends on who, but, like, maybe not them who like, really, really belong there. Uh,
So That brings me to a question I have again for both of you. And Audrey, you sort of touched on this when you answered my last question. Does abolition have essentially, for lack of a better term, a public relations problem? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly that oftentimes people are asking the wrong question about what it means to be abolitionist. And like Jose, like you were talking about, people's minds automatically go to the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Is part of that the fact that, for better or for worse, the movement is inherently, the title of the movement is inherently destructive and not constructive? And should we be advocating for more constructive labeling, more constructive discourse in order to sort of disabuse people that abolition just means tearing down all prison walls, letting everybody go, not having any consequences for anything?
I mean, I think it does have a public relations problem. I don't know if changing the name would help. So I think when Barrett and I were figuring out some of the, like, the editorial stuff, like the back end stuff for our book, I think that I had suggested, or one of us had suggested, like, decarceration in the title, which is kind of more descriptive of the kinds of things that I'm into. But, then there was some pushback because it was like, well, people don't know what decarceration means, right? Like, decarceration is even less of a familiar word than abolition. So we kind of stuck with abolition in the title. I mean, and sometimes I think that maybe a better name would help, but I also just realized that people who are invested in the carceral system will say whatever they want about us, no matter what it is that we call ourselves.
Mhm.
I mean, anarchists have a public relations problem.
Which we wholeheartedly embrace.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I think there's a PR problem. I'm not sure how much some of the public image stuff is where I'm gonna spend my energy instead of just telling people what I think abolitionists actually wanna do.
Jose, I'm curious to get your take because your experience, in a way, comports with mine, representing people who've been in jails and prisons. Oftentimes, are initially, to my surprise, some of the most politically conservative people who do not have views on the criminal justice system and on abolition that I have, even though they are the ones who have been most directly and most traumatically impacted by these systems. And I'm curious if you could offer some more insight that you have as to why that is, and if it is a communications issue, if it's a philosophical issue, if it's some other kind of issue.
So one of the things I was able to relate with Bell Hooks was her upbringing and household she came from. I feel that has a lot to do with the way people are programmed to think about or talk against abolition. So, say for example, myself, I come from a pastoral home. Also, both parents come from a military family, and so there's a lot of patriarchy in that sphere. So even my sisters, when I talk to them about it, they're just opposed by abolition or even opposed by talking against patriarchy, even though they have no understanding of what that patriarchy means.
Do you think that, like, when you relate to that upbringing, are you relating that to, like, the upbringings of a lot of people who have been incarcerated? Or are you relating that to, like, the kind of patriarchy in the system that people have been living under? Like, do you feel like if people have just been living in this patriarchal system for a long time,
Yes,
it's hard to see past it? So,
yes,
like, when you're incarcerated for a super long time, you're like, "Well, this is just how things work."
yes. Kind of like learning helplessness, where they're like just telling you, hey, this is how it is. They break you. And then oftentimes guys just give into it.
Yeah, well, I feel like and it kinda works in there too, right? Like, I mean, not that it's, like, helping people be happy or anything, but, like, if you are a super dominating guy, like, it often does kinda work out.
Well, yeah, because
So yeah.
I mean, you're raised to believe that, hey, your job is to dominate over others. I mean, we learn it through sports, we learn it through academics, we learn it through other peers outside of your family. And once and how it convicted me was it was telling me, "Hey, you're not dominating. That's not who you are naturally. You weren't born to dominate over others." So I started understanding that masculinity is defined as performance. And so I needed to somehow change that term and redefine it to more of a humane way of seeing it.
Do you ever find guys get, I mean, not necessarily in minimum, but, like, in other kinds of facilities? Do you ever find that guys, either by other incarcerated people or by staff, get, I don't know, bullied, pestered, or something like that if they're trying to do programming? I always wonder about this because I only ever, like, when I do book clubs and stuff inside, I only ever meet the people who actually show up.
Mhm.
And so I always wonder, like, what are the barriers that people have to face to actually get to the point where they, like, get to hang out with me in a class? Like, are they facing pushback from guards or from, their roommates or whoever? Like, do you yeah, because I feel like yeah.
I don't feel like I've experienced any pushback when I started my sentence at a maximum security. Oftentimes we're locked up for like 22, 23 hours a day. And so when we have an opportunity to go and learn, say if you were to show up, Audrey, you'd see a lot of guys showing up just to get themselves out of their cells. However, I really didn't care. Always into learning and educating myself. So other times, people, I feel like they're just insecure. They won't be able to understand it at an academic level. So a lot of them do hesitate from leaving. And then oftentimes, because we're locked up in our cells for so long, we've created a routine. So then to come out of or deviate from that routine is just, it's going to create chaos for that person. So that person becomes institutionalized.
Jose, along those lines, there's another quote I was hoping you could elaborate on from your piece. You write, and I believe you're quoting bell hooks again, about patriarchy in prison, and you write the dominator model, which teaches men that their worth lies in control, authority, and the subordination of others, must be replaced with a partnership model that fosters ethical sensibility, mutual respect, and relational equality. That's such a beautiful quote and a beautiful sentiment. And I was hoping you could expound a little bit more on what that partnership model would look like for you.
I'm still learning, but I find it a lot more productive to work with others equally rather than living on or dominating this hierarchy. Because once you're at the top, everybody wants to come after you. So there is no peace. There's no a partnership there. As opposed to working with others, there is that. You don't always have to feel like you have to complete the task. You have someone else to come and help you with that. And patriarchy does not tell you that. It tells you, hey, you have to do everything on your own. You're considered weak if you ask for help. You have to control others and mask your weakness so they don't see it. So there's all this deception. Who wants to be a part of, this deception mechanism? So I didn't want to be a part of that. I wanted people to see me for me and treat each other with dignity and respect. I just don't see that with patriarchy.
Audrey, reading Jose's piece and then reflecting on, you know, my experience in academia, I had some questions about your experience, which might be a little controversial, but I'm hoping you'll take it in the spirit that's intended. You know, obviously, prisons and universities are fundamentally different places, and I don't want to draw fallacious comparisons between the two for the sake of controversy. But I am curious if you have seen in academia, not particularly University of Victoria, but if you have seen in academia in general any analogies to these forms of domination that we've been talking about that very much exist in prisons, but I'm not sure, in fact, I'm pretty confident, aren't just limited to the carceral setting.
I mean, Yeah. So I think carceral logic or a kind of retributive justice ideas, hierarchies, they're all over the place. And I think that's what makes some of the kinds of social revolutions that I know lots of folks like you, like me, like Jose, like things that we want. It's part of why it's so hard. It's because the ideologies are all over the place, right? Like academia is so hierarchical. There's so often there are so often these people who can do whatever they want and will not really face any kinds of consequences because they have a certain amount of power. I mean, I see this in colleagues' responses to students. Like colleagues seem to kind of I mean, every once in a while I'll find someone who's like really excited to be able to punish their students for cheating. And that's just retributive logic, right? It's not prison. It's not like the same scale as anything like that, but it's the same kind of thinking, right? So I think that if we're actually going to try and abolish prisons, we actually do really need to abolish all kinds of retributive thinking because we kind of know it's not really that helpful. It's not really working. So, yeah, totally. I see parallels all over the place in universities.
There's a line from the article that I read of yours, Audrey, that I wanted to present to both of you. And Jose, I was hoping maybe I could get your reflections on this. And I think it might be sort of inherent to our thinking, but I think it's really important to sort of tease this out for our listeners because it's such an important point that I think people don't often understand. And Audrey, you wrote, quote, "There is no neat division between people who are victimized by violence and people who perpetrate it." And in my career, that has become so foundational that it is almost difficult to express to people who don't have experience in the criminal justice system. So first, I mean, turning to you, Jose, I was just wondering if you could reflect on that idea and just elaborate for our listeners how that preconceived notion that there is a big, thick line between victimizer and victim really just is not accurate in so many cases. And I mean, I assume you've seen that both inside and outside of prisons.
I'm still understanding what Audrey was writing there myself. I think if we could just let her answer it
Sure.
first, I could feed off what she said.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, nothing to apologize for.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you and I have talked about this, maybe just in less fancy journal language. But people it's I mean, it's kind of like we were talking about, even incarcerated people will sometimes think that there's this bright line between people who deserve to be in prison and people who don't. Like the really bad people and then the like only moderately bad people or the rest of us or people who like don't do anything that's like really so bad. But I think in practice maybe we can find extremes of people who've done like really, really awful things and people who have, almost never harmed, almost never really done anything bad. But most of us are somewhere in the middle. And most of us have hurt somebody in our lives. Most of us have been hurt by somebody in our lives. And yeah, like what good is it doing to try and to try and argue about like where exactly the line is, like how much harm exactly do you need to have caused even, or what kinds of harm do you need to have caused for you to be in one group versus the other group when so many of us are somewhere in that fuzzy line in between.
And to put a fine point on that, Jose, as well, is it true to your experience that so many of the people in prison who have committed these acts of violence had terrible acts of violence committed against them? Like the people who were aggressors were also victims before they became aggressors or even while and after they became aggressors.
Okay, I understand now. So I believe hurt people. So, and I'm talking from experience. I was raised in an environment where violence was almost second nature. I feel like most men who do end up coming to prison for violent charges or convictions I see that they have unresolved trauma. Myself, that's where I came to learning about, my personal growth, trying to find healing in order before I even could understand anything educational. I needed to like resolve my trauma.
Mhm.
And prisons are also sites of violence, right? Like, prison's a violent place, like, not just fights, but, like, guards do a lot of harm, like, it's so I don't know, it's so violating.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.
And maybe, Jose, if you could speak on that as well, because I think that's a really important point. How the violence that prisons are trying to put an end to oftentimes make it worse.
Yeah, I mean, the other day I was looking up Edmonton Institution on YouTube, and the way they portray it is so horrible. They make people or inmates look like monsters. Like, you have to wear uniform, you have to wear your what do they call that? Like squad gear in order to approach an inmate. But how can you approach an inmate who's locked up in his cell, nowhere to go, seeking for help, and yet you go in there with your squad gear, you w basically harm the person while you're trying to restrain them, and then take them to a segregation where they're locked up again for 22, 23 hours a day. So that's just abuse. What for? There was no need to do that. You're just sending him to another location with the same restrictions. So there is that need to use this power on us where they know we are powerless.
Mhm.
Do you think all the listeners know what segregation is?
Cell confinement. So,
Like
or
solitary, right, for
yes,
Americans or
solitary
yeah.
confinement. Yes. And so a lot of the time when you're in solitary confinement, you're just stuck with your thoughts. You don't have anything else. You're stripped, you're deprived of everything, phone calls, visits, and yeah.
And it's
Speaking of,
officially oh, yeah. It's
go
officially
ahead.
outlawed now, but I think they still kinda do it.
Yeah, they just rename it something else. And then they just add what, like 2, 3 more hours of free time away from yourself. So,
Speaking of Americans, there is something I'd like to get both of your take on again. I think that Canada and the CSC benefits in a strange way, or maybe even not so strange, in a direct way, from being so close to the United States, because the US carceral system, US mass incarceration exists on a scale that is off the charts. I mean, it is the gold standard of human rights abuses. It's the gold standard of violence. It's the gold standard of every awful and pernicious phenomenon attached to prisons and the carceral system. And it seems to me that sometimes Canada benefits by saying, oh, well, we're not that. We're better than that, which might be true on some level by certain metrics, but is not actually true philosophically, is not actually true by most metrics. It's like saying, well, that toilet is absolutely filthy, and this toilet is marginally less filthy. Both of them are still horrible, disgusting toilets.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, I was raised in I was raised in this country, and I have learned to hate how smug a lot of us are about the States and the idea that we're nothing like that and we could never be like that when so much of the ideological background is totally the same. So I think there are some differences in how our prison systems sell themselves. But if the Correctional Services of Canada, like they say they do in some of their official mandates, like if they do in fact have a rehabilitative mission, then there should be a way to get off of life sentences. Like if that is in fact their goal, which currently there isn't, and people are fighting for it. Like there's groups of people, especially through like CAFES, like Canadian Center for Elizabeth Fry Societies. Like there's a bunch of people who are fighting for it, but you know, Canada has the kinds of fancy. They have the nice language that says, "Oh, we're aimed at rehabilitation." but they're still fine sentencing people to be like living with the carceral system for the rest of their lives, and no way to ever prove to anybody that they don't actually need to be under that kind of community. They don't have to be on parole anymore. They can actually just be free, just be ordinary citizens. So that, I think, is one of the really notable examples of the hypocrisy of our system.
Jose, when you were inside, was there any consciousness amongst either other people inside or staff members of CSC that, oh, well, at least we're better than people down south? Our systems are better than the systems down south?
I don't think I ever heard a staff member say that. However, we often, and the incarcerated, we often do talk about that. When we watch TV and compare ourselves to the States, we think the States are a lot worse than us, just seeing the conditions of it. But then I had taken this program, which was like a parenting program, and they shed light on like the good side of how inmates are trying to help each other, how they're trying to connect with the community. And so Angola prison, which is perceived as this crazy, violent place where they sent violent people there, yet they brought this program in there and it transformed more than half of the prison. So I think what matters is the type of programs that inmates take, not just like the one size fit all by corrections.
I want to move now. I want to move away from talking too much about my former homeland, and talking to both of you. I kind of go back to the original topic of the conversation, Audrey, to your original paper. Is there a difference between feminist abolition and abolition? And if so, what is that difference?
I mean, I guess I think that all abolition should be feminist.
Mhm.
So I think that but I also think that a lot of abolitionists are feminists. Abolition, often the abolitionists that you will read who are actually doing work on the ground, a lot of them are women, a lot of them are Black women, or like women of color or survivors of violence. This is the case for at least a lot of the people that I read that I take a lot of inspiration from. So, but I think that what abolition feminism means is, I think, also just recognizing the extent to which the carceral system, even when it's not necessarily incarcerating women, although Canada does love to incarcerate Indigenous women. I think it's like the fastest growing incarcerated population in the country. Even when it's not incarcerating women, it's harming so many people. Because I think just seeing, I think our friends, Jose, like seeing their wives, for example, their moms come to visit them, like just getting to meet some of them at the socials. Like you just see the kinds of toll that incarceration takes on the entire family. And, often the kind of gendered labor that goes into, like you got to get the kids on the ferry from the mainland and get them over to see their dad and like get them through security, pack up everything so it's just perfect, or like arrange this visit, arrange for that thing. There's so much labor that goes into that. There's such an impact that goes into that. And I think that the kind part of what talking in terms of feminism means is that, like, we can't forget that, right? We can't forget how many non-incarcerated people the carceral system is harming.
Jose, for you, is there a difference between abolitionism and feminist abolitionism?
I don't think so. I think they go well together.
Yeah.
I think when men who don't have an understanding of what feminism is, they would automatically think, well, it's probably a far left kind of approach, or, oh, it's just women talking about it. They don't understand what the gravity nature of prison is like. And so, but personally, I don't see them as a separate thing.
What has it been like for you after you've been released doing this work? Because going from that incredibly dominating patriarchal place that is a prison and now leaving prison and becoming an abolitionist, writing about feminist abolitionism. What's that been like for you? How have your family, friends, maybe friends who are on the inside with you, how have they responded to you doing this work?
I think inside, when I first started learning and practicing, a lot of men thought like, oh, they associated feminism with gay people or LGBTQ plus 2S. And so it wasn't what they wanted to digest. So they've already judged feminism off the hop. So a lot of people seen that, and they would, and then what I would do is that I would challenge them, and then come up with scenarios and tell them, well, what do you think about this? Well, this is what the feminism is talking about. They want to, they what they want to talk about is about equality and equity. What's wrong with that, right? So I tried even understanding it myself, because at first I used to oppose it, and the reason why I did, which I came to it to understanding, is I've been ingrained growing up thinking that as a man or as a male, I'm supposed to be dominating. And so when you have feminism coming, the philosophy of feminism coming to you, it's just like, okay, you know what? I have to oppose this. There's no way I can lose this position of
Hmm.
power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
once again,
Audrey,
like the partnership, right? We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to be in fear of losing power, because we're all sharing it together.
Audrey, what has been your experience, especially going inside and working with incarcerated folks, talking to them about, not just abolition, but feminist abolition, which, I sort of already kind of know a little bit of the answer, but can be incredibly controversial when you're doing this work inside of a prison.
So the kinds of I think some of the kinds of pushback that I feel like I get is is often in relationships with prison staff. And yeah, I mean, I think like this is also part of your article, Jose, I think, is that especially if you are like a woman, a femme, whichever, going in to work to do things in a men's prison, I think some people, and I'm gonna say it's not every staff member, but it's at least some staff in these places will look at you like, oh, well, you're just gonna go in there to like, I don't know, whatever, find a husband or something weird like that.
They make
Uh,
it inherently sexual.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And I'm like, I can go in there dressed as dykey as I possibly can, and they'll still somehow make it make it like I'm going there to look for a man. So I think that I've just been really hyper aware of that kind of scrutiny from staff. So, and I don't think that was on my radar when I first went in. Like, I feel like that was something that I had to realize was gonna end up being a problem, because I just the way that I interact with people, like, I feel like the way that we kind of immediately, because we were friends pretty fast, I think. And so we were automatically really friendly, and so just having staff, like, look at us, be like, "Oh, like, are you standing close? Are you talking to each other?" Like, no, nothing like that is happening. But that was, I think, one of these moments when I was like, "Oh, no, this is how they're looking at me. Like, this is how they're seeing what's happening."
I feel
Uh,
like because they knew your work and they knew who I was as somebody who would speak against or truth against power and always challenge their discretion's decision making. And so I feel like because you and I clicked, it was to them, it was considered as a threat. Okay, what is she going to brainwash Jose into doing?
yeah, they knew we were gonna come on this podcast.
Well, and what strikes me, I mean, it's obvious, but as noteworthy is how, especially towards both of you, that's inherently infantilizing. Like the idea that Audrey could brainwash you, Jose, that you're that easily brainwashed, that you're somehow so without your own personality and sense of self that you would just surrender to this stranger and do whatever she told you to do. Like that in and of itself is such a sad and terrible dynamic, and maybe even an example of the patriarchy that we've been talking about.
Mhm. So that's my interpretation of how they approached us.
Mm.
However, they twisted it into thinking that we were having inappropriate relationship. So oftentimes it was brought up in reports where they would bring up Audrey and say, well, they should be monitored because what they must have is professional. So, I mean, what else are they thinking other than professional?
Well, and I think and it also went the other way because the volunteer training that you have to go through when you, like, sign up to be a volunteer through CSC, like, there's a bunch of stuff that kind of warns you. They're like, "Oh, these inmates are gonna try and manipulate you, like, don't tell them anything about yourself, like, don't give them any personal information, don't be too open, don't be too friendly, because 'cause they're gonna take advantage of it." So, like, I feel like the way it's set up is, like, we should automatically be on guard against each other.
I mean,
Um
they do it on female staff as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I've seen it and heard it myself, where the men would tell the female staff if they're being helpful, which I mean, the staff should. They would try to tell her like, "Hey, see, this is what's happening. All of a sudden, these guys are coming to come and ask you for help, and you're gonna be manipulated by these men." I heard this coming from them, and then that's when it clicked, and I'm like, "What's going on here?" Well, I thought you guys are trying to help us here.
Yeah, and again, right? If the goal is anything like rehabilitation, don't you want incarcerated men to be able to have, like, normal relationships with women? Like, don't you want them to be able to, like, be friends with women? Like, that's a normal I actually kind of want all men to be able to be friends with women, but that seems like it would be an essential thing for helping someone reintegrate into, like, a mixed gender society.
I think
Um
it's beyond gender, like having respect for women. I think it also is the idea of the mentality of us versus them. So when someone staff member deviates away from that, they would have to punish them, telling them like, "Hey, this is not how it goes. We've already had this established. The groundwork's there. Do not try to deviate out of that."
Well, we're running up on an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. My last question, Jose, and Audrey, you as well, but I want to quote from Jose's article. In terms of how we move forward, you write that the work ahead is twofold: accountability and solidarity. And I'm hoping that you can expound upon that for our listeners.
Okay. For one, accountability, I think it's hard for men to own up for their mistakes and the way they see themselves in the patriarchal realm. But I feel like once you attain accountability, you can move past that and then hold others accountable. I love to hold CSC accountable, especially when they continuously quote the mission statement. And yet they can't follow through that. They can't even remember their own policies or their own laws, their own legislations. And so I think holding ourselves accountable, even people who are just starting to learn about feminist masculinity or how to take down the patriarchal order, people are like at different degrees in these stages. But when we hold ourselves accountable, I feel like that's where we kind of can move forward and progress. And by doing that, we keep ourselves solid. Like
And what
solidarity will get us further.
Yeah, and just to jump off of that, I feel like, you know, part of accountability and solidarity go so well together, right? Like, I feel like I totally have friends who will tell me if they think I did something wrong. And part of the reason why I feel like I can trust them to do that is because I know we're working for the same things, And like we have that kind of basis of solidarity. So if you think that I'm going about this in a way that's bad or harmful or counterproductive, well, like we've got that basis of solidarity. We've got our relationship. So you can tell me if you think that I'm doing it wrong. And
Yeah.
I'll know that you want me to do it better because you know we share the same kinds of goals.
Not just learning how to do it better, but actually learning what I did to harm you
Yeah. Yeah. Or vice versa. Like I feel like
or accepting it.
yeah, we've probably each told each other, like, I'd like you to do this differently.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have.
Yeah.
And
um,
But
isn't that
that's
the
what I
very
love.
definition? Isn't that the very definition of friendship? Is telling
Yeah.
each other what we can do differently and better.
Yes. Yes. But yes, holding ourselves accountable when we do deviate from like having respect and dignity for each other is for me it's most important.
Well, this has been fantastic. Dr. Audrey Yap, Jose Toruno-Luquez. Dr. Yap is a professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Victoria. Her research is in feminist philosophy with a particular focus on prison justice. And Jose Toruno-Luquez is a community researcher who is on parole and has lived experience with incarceration. Audrey, Jose, I really, really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on Seeds of Revolution.
If Jesus
Thanks for
Christ
having
came
us.
back today,
Yes, thank you.
like you threatened he will, which poor group of people do you think that he would kill? And who would Jesus choose to starve if you gave him the chance? And if there was a genocide, would he take a neutral stance? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would he say it's complicated and there's sinners on both sides? Or would he say that some people, they just deserve to die? If Jesus Christ rose from the dead and on a sidewalk slept, would you extend your hand to him or just watch where you stepped? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus hate the gay folk, the queer folk, or the trans? Would he suggest they end their lives according to God's plans? Would Jesus tell a homeless man to get a fucking job, or turn his back on the poor? Would Jesus be a snob? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus build a border wall? Would Jesus drive a tank? Would Jesus be a landlord? Would Jesus run a bank? Would Jesus Christ feel safe in his skin if he came to your town? And would you still believe in him if you found out he was brown? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Yeah, who would Jesus bomb? I want you to ask yourself, well,